Hello chess friends and welcome to Jozarov chess channel and welcome back to the computer Blitz chess championship in 2021. We have reached now the semi-final stage of the super event, and this semi-finals is not a usual bracket system. It's not a knockout stage, it's still a league format like in the previous games that we have analyzed. So when an engine is losing maybe one game, it doesn't get kicked out. It still can perform in the later stage of the tournament, but of course from the semi-finals the two best engines are then battling it out in the super final. In my opinion, we'll have again an epic battle between Lila C0 and Stockfish. So we're following now a great gameplay by Stockfish against another top engine Stoofvlees from this semi-finals. It was a great game in the French defense, and usually I don't like to cover French defense games as sometimes they are simply too positional, too static. There are tiny little moves just in order to improve your position slightly. This game is an open Rubinstein French, and that's why I decided to show you this one, because it will have a beautiful tactical element which is called the demolition of the pawn structure. The demolition of the pawn structure is a beautiful element when your opponent builds maybe sort of a pawn chain and then you break it somewhere. When you kick really and the pawn chain explodes, then of course you have another tactical possibility. So that's why I think this was a very instructive game with beautiful tactical elements. So let's check out now the game. Here e4 played by Stockfish. We have e6 by Stoofvlees. We have d4, d5. The French is on the board. After move knight to c3, there are now several ways how black can proceed. Black can go into the normal classical system. Here with the move knight to f6 can go into the whenever variation. Still the organizer prearranged this move, d takes e4, which is now the so-called Rubinstein variation of the French defense. So we have now of course knight to e4, bishop to d7. This move is natural. It maybe seems in the beginning like inaccuracy or something, but for instance this line has been played also by Magnus Carlsen in one particular game here as black. Bishop to d7 is a natural idea because many times you have problems to develop your light square bishop somewhere in the French defense. I've played several times the French defense. I'm really not a fan of it. I tried it out, and as I said, I had always the problems where to go with this light square bishop. It's simply too blocked out. If you play b6, then you could face maybe here some light square weaknesses. So that's why bishop to d7 without moving the b6 move is now the main goal, and then maneuver the bishop here to this diagonal, and suddenly the bishop is good again. But the problem of this particular opening is that you're breaking a little bit the principles, the basic principles of chess, because you're playing with the same piece twice in the opening. So it has of course its advantages. As I always like to say, it has of course its disadvantages. So after move bishop to d7, knight to f3, we have now this idea, bishop to c6, bishop to d3, knight to d7, and after castling, now the last move that was prearranged by the organizer is the move bishop to e4. And okay, you can give up sometimes your bishop for a knight in an early stage of the game when you have maybe a clear plan what you're doing. In my opinion, this is not a good line. This last prearranged move is not so good. The engine gives here already a +1 evaluation for white. This is playable, of course, if you're not doing what you're doing, but in this top engine level, you see now how Stockfish will make something out of it, because when you're giving up the bishop for a knight, you have to make a really great plan how to create statics, because the knights, of course, on the board love static games. In my opinion, this is not a secured static game. This game can explode still. This game can be really dynamic because the pawn structure in the center is not static. That's, I think, something that we should recognize here, because with c4, d5, c5, we can still create really some madness in the center of the board. If the pawn structure would be something like d4, d5 static, then of course giving up the bishop for a knight wouldn't be such a huge problem, I think, in the continuation of the game. So that's why obviously also my Stockfish engine at home evaluated this move bishop to e4 as a clear mistake. But as I said, it's simple as that. The prearranged lines are sometimes bad, sometimes good. In this particular case, this is not a good move here for Stoofvlees. So after move bishop to e4, of course, bishop to e4 played by Stockfish, we have c6. Now when we gave up the light square bishop like Stoofvlees did here, of course we have to secure a compact position on that squares that the bishop covered. It means now you have to play a compact position on light square. So that's why this is a natural move. Now here black is trying to build maybe fortresses with the pawn here with the move g6, then maybe knight to d7, knight to f6, or fix the position simply around the squares here, or really try trying to build a blockade, a simple on life square. So after move c6, we have now the move c4, knight to f6, we have bishop to c2, bishop to d6, and now bishop to d2 here by Stockfish. Stockfish is trying now to maneuver the bishop on a new square. And when you're playing now the game here from White's perspective, there is a clear plan what to do. First of all, what we should do is to restrict the knight's ability to play. We should always evaluate where this knight can jump, especially where this knight can jump on our side of the board, which means now we have to really protect this square. Maybe we have to also protect these squares. These are squares maybe that the black can use, black knight could use here. Also the g4 square could be sort of an object of black's attack. So that's why we have to protect our squares. When we move up also a little bit further with our pawns, when we restrict this knight's ability to play, then it's really time to strike. Then it's time to open the game, because what black would love to do, maybe as sort of a plan, is force you maybe to play somehow the move c5. If you could just imagine, let's maybe make a move here, a5, maybe something like c5. That would be a strategical problem here for white. If white does it, maybe here bishop to c7. If you try, I don't know, let's see a new move, maybe bishop to d3. I just wanted to show you what black's actual goal would be. Then of course black would love to play something like this. Black would love to create again a compact position, again a static position. Black would love to cement somewhere this knight on the board, and then we have suddenly not such a good position anymore for white. So as I said, this would be sort of a plan which black could use, but of course Stockfish plays this game almost perfectly always. So that's why here Stockfish prevents always the first this potential knight mobility, the potential bishop's mobility, because there is also a different plan what black can do. Black would love also maybe to give up this bishop for a bishop, and then again white doesn't have any more the advantage of the bishop pair, which is also something that we should notice. So with the move a5, Stoofvlees basically announced that it tries simply to play here also the move bishop to b4, forcing maybe a trade of dark square bishop. So we have to understand, I think, the strategical elements, because when we understand the strategy of the game, I think it's much easier to understand the next couple more moves, what these engines are doing. And of course I use Stockfish engines at home in order to analyze the tactics, but I think as humans we can understand the main strategies, and then of course we're using a little bit this engines just in order to improve also our tactical skills or find the best solutions in tactical problems of vertical games. So after move a3, here simple castling play by Stoofvlees. We have queen to e2, we have rook to e8, of course getting the rook where already the queen is, because now Stoofvlees is also trying maybe here e5 pawn breakthrough, really, because we have here a great control of the square. So now e5 is the serious threat. So bishop to c3, that's why Stockfish prevents this idea. Here in the continuation we have queen to c7, and again rook to e1. It's a huge battle now for the e5 square, really wild stuff already in an early stage of the game. So we have now g6, and now knight to e5. We have c5, of course. What Stoofvlees is trying to do is deflect this pawn from the defense of the knight. Then we could simply take out the knight on e5. In the continuation we have knight to d7, we have knight takes d7, and now d takes c5, knight to c5. And okay, this knight is now maneuvered, but still it's not a fixed knight. We have to notice that, as we said, black hopes for a position where the knight can be fixed around one square, and then the knight cannot be anymore kicked away maybe with some pawn activity. So far that we can say that this knight on c5 is not fixed, because still it can be kicked away with the potential b4 move. And we have now great restriction. You see this bishop is controlling the knight activity. The knight doesn't have good score. So as we said in the beginning, we are trying to play this preventing ideas. We're trying to simply take over the squares that black would love to, of course, occupy. So that's why I think it was so far a great positional game by Stockfish. So here we have h4. Most of us, I think, would play something like g3, but not, of course, Stockfish. I was considering immediately this move g3 when I analyzed the game at home. I said to myself, this is a good move now for white. But here Stockfish, not that Stockfish is only protecting its h2 square, it also creates now new attacking possibilities with the move h4, because what we're trying to do is, of course, also to play the move h5, and then suddenly the bishop, the position for the bishops is perfectly fine. So after move h4, we have now the move a4. Again, Stoofvlees is trying maybe for simplification, tries to fix the knight somewhere, tries to maybe try knight to b3, then bishop to b3, a takes b3. But the problem again, I think, is that white doesn't have to react. Even if you play knight to b3, okay, the rook is attacked, still we can use then the move rook to d1, and the knight is simply stuck on a weird square on b3 where it's actually doing nothing. So that's why this knight on c5 is really a bad piece. Great, as I said, positional play by Stockfish. We have queen to f3, we have f5, rook to d1, we have bishop to f8, and now bishop to e5, we have queen to f7, and now h5. As we said, we're trying to open the position for the bishops, even if we have to sacrifice maybe one pawn. But even if you try g takes h5, it's not a good position. Then we can use the dark square problems here all over the board. We can also improve maybe here bishop to d6, rook to d6, then rook to e5, attacking further maybe the knight on c5. So as I said, this is not a good position here for black. So after move h5, we have bishop to g7, bishop to d6. Again, here Stoofvlees is trying repetition, hopes for a draw here. Bishop to e5, bishop to g7, bishop to d6, bishop to f8, and now finally queen to e3. Here Stockfish makes now a decision. In the continuation of the game, we have bishop to d6, rook to d6, and now rook to c8, of course protecting the knight. But now comes a very important move, queen to d4, because what we can notice now, we have now the strategical disadvantage here for black. It's the backward pawn on e6. Now how to play, of course, against backward pawns? It's simple. We have to create a blockade. We're not allowing here this e5 move by black. If that happens, of course, then black could have a huge advantage in the center of the board. Then black could have these two connected pawns, and then maybe black could suddenly build some very annoying spaces that white wouldn't tolerate. So that's why this blockade idea around the square e5 is so far a great idea by Stockfish. So we have queen to f8, rook to e5. You see this move is coming. We have queen to g7. We have now h6. Of course, if you take queen to h6, then you lose simply here this piece. So that's why it was a great deflection idea. So that's why here queen to f6 has to be played, and now f4, fixing the position simply further on dark squares. Really great positional game by Stockfish. Really now the position is fixed, and although it seems so that this is a good position for Stoofvlees, because it has a compact position. Still, this knight is a huge problem. So far it's twice attacked. Queen rook takes c5 in this particular position wouldn't be possible, because of course first we take out the queen, you take the queen, but then we can take, of course, also the rook on c5. If you try this idea differently, if you try something like this, still we can take out this one, you have one check, but still it's a much better position here for black. Although white has a rook and the bishop for the queen, but it's not a good position for white here. The pieces are not connected, no threats are possible here, so that's why it's not a good continuation. So that's why this was a necessary move here, the move f4 by Stockfish. So king to f7 here by Stoofvlees, and now comes really beautiful move. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see now the best continuation here here for white. Take your time, don't hurry, just try to see really beautiful continuation here that of course Stockfish saw immediately. So okay, the correct move here is a brilliant move. It's the move rook bishop to f5. Really tricky stuff. This was now this tactic, demolition of a pawn structure. You see black has built this pawn chain on light squares, but now the pawn chain is broken. Now the whole position is falling apart. The whole setup that we try to make here is falling apart. If you try something like g takes f5, of course, then you get this one, rook to f5. You see you cannot take the queen because of the spin by the rook against the king. You have to take out this one, but then you get queen to g7. It checkmate, and of course e takes f5 is not working anyway because of this idea, rook takes f6. So really brilliant move, bishop to f5. Here in the continuation we have now b6, we have bishop to c2, we have rook to b8, and now again f5 with the same idea. Really brilliant attacking opportunities here for Stockfish. We have rook to d8, we have f takes g6, h takes g6, and now rook to d8, rook takes d8, and now queen to e3. The good part about Stockfish setup is of course that the bishop on c2, not that it's only attacking here the king side, it's also protecting the d1 square. So now a great setup again, and again pointing out the knight is simply a bad piece. The knight was stuck through the whole game here on c5 and it didn't do anything. Now in the continuation of the game, finally a new knight move, knight to d7, but now rook to e4, also with preparations to play the move rook to f4. Here in the continuation we have queen to b2, and here a great move, queen to g5 by Stockfish, sacrificing the bishop, but just in order to deflect the queen from this square. This is now an important square here that the queen is not covering if you take out the bishop, because now this pass pawn is a very annoying pass pawn. In the continuation of the game here, Stoofvlees accepts the challenge, takes simply out, queen takes c2, but now rook to f4, we have king to e8, and now king to h2, first securing the king. Nothing wrong with this move. Now this pawn is marching, and the problem is now you cannot include these other pieces into defense. The knight is simply too far away from the action, the rook is simply too far away from the action. You cannot play knight to f8. I think that's now the huge problem, because if you do knight to f8, then you get rook to f8, king to f8, and then you get queen to d8. That's now the main tactic that Stockfish has prepared, and still, as we said, the knight is simply too far away from the action. This is now the pass pawn that is now the whole game for Stockfish. Here in the continuation we have b5, we have h7, we have queen to b2, of course protecting the h8 square, and now again a great move. Maybe you can pause the video and try to see now again the best continuation here for Stockfish. Great move again. Okay. Here Stockfish found again a brilliant move, rook to f6, cutting off the connection between the queen and the square h8. You have to now react. If you play, of course, queen takes f6, queen takes, knight takes f6, and then a new promotion. Here in the continuation we had knight to f6, and here Stockfish simply promoted the new queen, and from this point on it's obviously game over for Stoofvlees. We have king to d7, queen to g7 the check. Now we have c takes b5 the check, now simply taking out the knight, check. Here queen to c4, we have queen to c6 check, and now a new check. After a couple more checks here in the continuation, after b6 in this position, after g5 and queen to c8, it was a beautiful checkmate. So brilliant stuff again by Stockfish. I really enjoyed the game because it shows really these problems when you give up. I think first of all the bishop for a knight in an early stage of the game, which is an advice here by me for you. Don't do that if you don't have a clear plan. As I said, if you cannot create really a fixed position, don't trade off the bishop for a knight. It was now I think a theoretical game here by Stockfish, which showed us how to play with the bishop here on the board, how to provoke weakness, how to create weaknesses, how to get out, how to restrict this knight's ability to play, how to improve the bishop's activity. Really beautiful strategic game here by the fish, and I really enjoyed it. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed the game like I did. If you want to see more attacking brilliances and positional brilliances like this, check out my commented chat games, play by computer series with some more games played by Stockfish, Alpha Zero, Lila Zero, and many more. And if you want to see maybe human games, the best chess games that have been played in chess history, check out my commented chat games, the best chess games of all time series. Here's also the link of our playlist, and if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.